First, it's important to know the context of our business. So where I work, it's called the Alberta Investment Management Corporation. So we're an asset manager of 26 pension and endowment clients. And so our mandate is really to add value above what our clients dictate as their asset mix or their policy benchmark. So they provide us sort of they want us to invest their money, 30% in, say, the MSCI World Index, and so on. So they give us sort of an allocation, and then our goal is to add value on top of that. So if the benchmarks achieve, say, 10%, our goal is to add, 1.5 over that, maybe, so 11.5 would be our goal. So that's the important context for us. Essentially, in order to do that, to add that value, we have to take some deviation away from the benchmarks. So that deviation, we call it, you can measure it, right? And we call it active risk. So that's slightly different than other financial institutions that look at more their total risk. We look at the relative risk to the benchmark. And so in order to come back to the question, our risk budgeting methodology and the risk appetite statement, it's all based on an active risk metric and active risk methodology. So now, to start that off, our risk budget starts with our value-added targets, which our portfolio managers actually design. So they decide that, or it's approved by our board. So that's the starting point, though. So as the more return, they should get equally amount of risk. That's sort of the main concept. Risk and return should go hand in hand. And so then in order to convert the value-added targets to our risk budget, we use an information ratio. We make some analysis, some research, and we choose an appropriate information ratio that makes a conversion. Then, so we come to an active risk limit. However, the confusion there was some different definition, interpretation of that. Should it be a risk limit that's really a hard limit that after that you don't surpass, or is it a target? So in the end, we decided we should have two numbers. So let's say 5% and a 7%. The 5%, we call it an active risk target. So that's a new concept we introduced, and that's the similar concept to a risk appetite statement. So essentially, we would have two information ratio assumptions that would lead to the 5% and the 7%. The 7% is the active risk limit. The 5% would be an active risk target. And so together you see a bit of a buffer, a 2% buffer, let's say. And the goal is now we have the 7% is a hard limit. You should not pass that. That's sort of your risk limit and what we call a risk tolerance. Whereas the active risk target is what the portfolio managers should strive towards. So they should be taking that amount of risk on average over time in order to achieve their value-added targets. So now you have something different. So you have that. So if they go over 5%, they go to 6%, it's okay, but you're supposed to be having around 5% of active risk target. And so that's the main metric that was important, and that distinction between the two numbers that was helpful for the portfolio managers, because now they know this is how much they should be taking. And sometimes they take too little risk. So again, that helps them bring it up to near 5, which we can encourage them to go up as well. And that's it. So once we get that 5%, that active risk target, we were able to follow the risk budget methodology and then sort of decompose that to the asset class levels and sort of make that connection to the risk appetite statement.